This island sits right between England and Ireland. The people speak English, they use the British pound, and in almost every way, it feels like it should be part of the UK. But it isn't. The Isle of Man exists in a strange position, connected to Britain, yet officially outside of it. And that unusual status has turned this small island into something almost invisible on the global stage, but incredibly powerful in its own way. Because here, rules don't always work the way you'd expect. Over time, the Isle of Man has built a system that allows it to operate differently from both the UK and the European Union, creating laws and policies that you won't find anywhere else. Some of them are clever, some of them are controversial, and some of them push the limits of what a place like this should even be allowed to do. So how did this tiny island end up in such a unique position? And why has it been able to stay that way for so long? The first thing you need to understand about the Isle of Man is that it's small, really small. At just around 574 square kilometers, it's easy to overlook on a map. To put that into perspective, it's only about 3 times the size of Washington, D.C. You could drive across it in under an hour, and yet, for thousands of years, this tiny island has mattered far more than its size suggests. Because it sits in one of the most important locations in Europe, right in the middle of the Irish Sea, almost perfectly placed between England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And this positioning creates something rare, not isolation, but exposure. Most islands are cut off from the world. This one was stuck directly in the path of it. Trade routes, invasions, empires, everything passed through here. And there's a place on the island where you can actually feel that. At the top of Snaefell, standing 620 meters above sea level, there's an old local saying that from this summit, you can see 7 kingdoms: England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, the kingdom of man, the sea, and the heavens. Now, obviously, you're not literally seeing heaven, but the rest, geographically speaking, it's not far from the truth. On a clear day, you can genuinely see multiple coastlines, which makes this one of the only places in the world where you can visually grasp how central this island really is. And that centrality is everything. Because the Isle of Man wasn't hidden, it was in the way. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Why is there an island here at all? Geologically, the Isle of Man is ancient, extremely ancient. Much of the island is made up of max slate, formed around 480 million years ago. That means this land existed long before most modern continents look the way they do today. And unlike the soft, rolling hills of southern England, this place feels rough, sharp, compressed, almost like a piece of another country. In fact, if you drop someone here without telling them where they were, they might think they were in the Scottish Highlands. Because visually, it looks like it doesn't belong where it is. The island is dominated by a central spine of hills, running almost like a backbone from north to south. And this isn't just geography, it shapes society. Historically, this ridge divided the island into 2 worlds, north and south. Different communities, different accents, even subtle cultural differences that still exist today. But then the landscape changes completely. In the north, everything flattens out. Wide plains, sandy soils, fertile land created by glaciers thousands of years ago. So within just a few kilometers, you go from rugged mountains to soft farmland to open coast. And that rapid transition creates something unusual, a compressed world. On mainland Britain, you can travel for hours inland. Here, you're never far from the ocean, ever. No matter where you stand, the sea is always close, always present, always reminding you you're on an island. And that isolation did something unexpected. It turned the Isle of Man into a biological experiment. Around 8,500 years ago, rising sea levels cut the island off from Britain and Ireland. And when that happened, not everything made the journey. There are no native foxes, no badgers, no squirrels. Instead, the island developed its own strange quirks, like the famous Manx cat, a cat with no tail, not because it evolved that way naturally, but because of isolation. A small gene pool allowed a rare mutation to spread until it became normal. It's a perfect example of what happens when geography traps life in a closed system. But the most important feature of the Isle of Man isn't its mountains or its animals. It's the coastline. Because this island is surrounded by one of the most unpredictable bodies of water in Europe, the Irish Sea is rough, cold, unforgiving. And around the Isle of Man, it becomes even more dangerous, especially near the Calf of Man, separated by a narrow channel known as the Sound. Here, tidal currents accelerate dramatically, fast enough to destroy ships, unpredictable enough to confuse even experienced sailors. This natural defense made the island incredibly difficult to invade. High cliffs, rocky shores, violent waters, few safe landing points. Compared to England or Ireland, which have long, accessible coastlines, the Isle of Man was a fortress. But there's a catch. A fortress in the middle of a busy sea is also a target. Because if you control the Isle of Man, you control movement across the Irish Sea. And if you don't control it, someone else will. Which is exactly why this island spent centuries being fought over, invaded, controlled, lost, and taken again. Because geography didn't isolate the Isle of Man, it made it valuable, dangerously valuable. And that raises the next question. If everyone wanted this island, why does it belong to no one today? If you walk through the streets of Douglas or Peel, you'll notice a strange symbol everywhere. On flags, on buildings, on coins, 3 armored legs connected at the center, spinning in a perfect circle. This is the Triskelion, and it comes with a motto: whichever way you throw me, I shall stand. At first, it sounds poetic, almost symbolic. But when you look at the history of the Isle of Man, you realize something else. This island didn't choose that motto. It earned it. Because for over 2,000 years, this island has been passed around like a chess piece. Empires came, empires left. But somehow, the island never disappeared. Originally, the Isle of Man was Celtic. After the last ice age, people returned and built a culture deeply connected to nearby Ireland. The Manx language, still spoken today, comes from the same family as Irish and Scottish Gaelic. And even now, you can still hear echoes of that ancient past in the language. There's even a legend that the island was protected by a sea god who covered it in mist to hide it from invaders. And for a long time, that myth felt real. Because when the Roman Empire conquered most of Britain, they ignored the Isle of Man. They knew it was there, but they never took it, which made the island something rare. A quiet, untouched outpost. But that didn't last, because in the 8th century, the sea changed. It stopped being a barrier and became a highway. The Vikings arrived. But unlike in England, where they raided and left, or settled and merged, the Vikings saw something different here: opportunity. By 1079, a Norse leader named Godred Crovan took control of the island. But instead of handing it over to Norway, he did something unexpected. He built something new: the Kingdom of the Isles, a maritime power controlling the Isle of Man and parts of Western Scotland. From this tiny island, fleets of Viking ships controlled movement across the Irish Sea. Trade, war, politics, all influenced from here. And during this time, something even more important was created: the Tynwald. Founded over 1,000 years ago, it is the oldest continuous parliament in the world, older than most countries, older than most governments. And it wasn't hidden behind walls. It was open, public, held on a hill, where laws were read aloud to the people. And here's the insane part: they still do it today. Every year, on July 5th, at Tynwald Hill, if a law isn't read aloud, it doesn't exist. That level of continuity is almost unheard of. And it's the reason the island never fully lost itself, because when control changed, the system didn't. By the 13th century, Viking power faded, and 2 new forces emerged: the Kingdom of Scotland and the Kingdom of England. And both wanted the same thing: the island in the middle. For over a century, the Isle of Man was fought over constantly. Taken, lost, taken again. At one point, even Robert the Bruce captured it. But eventually, England secured control. And here's where the story takes a strange turn. Because England didn't do what you'd expect. They didn't turn it into a normal part of the country. They didn't make it a county. They didn't fully absorb it. Instead, they gave it away. The island was handed to a noble family, the Stanleys, given the title Lord of Man, which meant the island became something incredibly rare. A privately ruled country for over 300 years. This family controlled everything: laws, taxes, money. They technically answered to the English king, but only symbolically, sometimes paying tribute with something as bizarre as two falcons. The Isle of Man wasn't part of England. It wasn't independent either. It was something in between. And that in-between status created a problem. By the 1700s, the island became the smuggling capital of Europe. Goods like tea, tobacco, and alcohol were brought into the island with low taxes, then secretly moved into Britain, avoiding high customs duties. The British government was losing massive amounts of money, but they couldn't just take the island because legally it wasn't theirs. So they did something unusual. In 1765, they bought it. This is known as the Revestment Act. The British Crown paid the ruling family to give up control. Now, this should have been the moment. The moment the Isle of Man officially became part of the UK, but it didn't. Instead, Britain made a decision that still affects the world today. They kept the island separate, not a country, not part of the UK, but a crown dependency. Even today, Charles III is not the king of the Isle of Man. He holds a different title, Lord of Man. It sounds small, but it changes everything because it means the island belongs to the crown, but not to the country. And that legal gray zone is exactly what allowed the Isle of Man to become something completely different. Because when you don't fully follow the rules, you can start creating your own. And that's where things get really interesting. Because today, this tiny island has built one of the strangest systems in the world. Low taxes, flexible laws, financial freedom, but also serious risks. So the real question is, why does the UK allow this? And how did this tiny island turn its strange legal status into one of the most powerful advantages in Europe? If you land on the Isle of Man today and open your passport, you might notice something strange. At first glance, it looks normal, British, familiar, standard. But then you read the details, and suddenly something feels off. Because if you're from the UK, your passport says United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But if you're from the Isle of Man, it says something different. British Islands, Isle of Man, just a few words. But those words reveal something huge. An invisible border, a legal separation, a system that doesn't follow the rules. So what exactly is going on here? The answer lies in one of the strangest legal distinctions in the modern world. Because the United Kingdom and the Crown are not the same thing. The UK is a country, a government, a state. But the Isle of Man, it doesn't belong to that state. It belongs to the Crown, specifically to Charles III in his separate role as Lord of Man. That title sounds symbolic, but legally, it changes everything. Because it means this: the UK protects the island, but it doesn't control it. London handles defense, foreign relations, global representation, but inside the island, the UK has no automatic authority. It can't set taxes. It can't control schools. It can't regulate daily life. The Isle of Man operates inside a protected bubble, shielded by one of the world's strongest nations, but free from its rules. And inside that bubble, things get very interesting. Let's start with the most famous example. Every year, the island does something that would be banned almost anywhere else on Earth. It turns public roads into a racetrack, the Isle of Man TT. For 2 weeks, normal traffic disappears, and motorcycles take over. Speeds over 300 kilometers per hour on narrow roads, through villages, past houses, with stone walls just inches away. Since 1907, over 260 riders have died. In most countries, this would be shut down instantly. Too dangerous, too risky, Too uncontrollable. But here, they allow it because they can. And it doesn't stop there. Outside urban areas, there is no national speed limit. You can drive as fast as your car allows on public roads, legally. It's one of the last places in the developed world where that's still possible. But the real power of the island isn't speed, it's money. Because the Isle of Man controls its own tax system, and it made a very deliberate choice. Low taxes, extremely low. Top income tax around 22%. No capital gains tax. No inheritance tax. Corporate tax, often 0%. That combination turned the island into something else entirely. A financial magnet. First came banking, then insurance. And today, digital industries, especially one in particular. Online gambling. There's a high chance that if you've ever placed an online bet, the servers behind it were running in Douglas. The island legalized and regulated online gambling early, before most countries even understood it, and that gave it a massive head start. Now, it's one of the biggest hubs for the industry in the world. But here's where things get even more interesting. Who actually lives here? The population is small, around 84,000 people, but only about half were born on the island. The rest arrived later. Entrepreneurs, tech workers, wealthy individuals, people chasing opportunity or escaping something else. Locals even have a name for them, stopovers. And this creates a strange mix. Old Viking descended families living next to modern digital millionaires. Traditional culture next to global finance. And politically, it's even stranger. There are almost no traditional political parties. Most politicians run as independents, which means government isn't driven by ideology. It's practical, local, direct. Fix the roads, keep the ferry running, solve real problems. But there's a downside. Living here isn't easy. Everything has to be imported. Food, goods, materials. That makes life expensive. Housing costs are high. Options are limited. And for younger people, there's something else. Isolation. You can cross the entire island in about an hour. No major concerts. Limited services. Few large opportunities. If you want more, you leave to Dublin or London, which creates a constant tension. Stay or go. Freedom or limitation. And that's what makes the Isle of Man so fascinating. Because it's not just a place. It's a leftover, a surviving fragment of a different world. A time when Europe wasn't made of large countries, but hundreds of small territories, duchies, kingdoms, microstates. Almost all of them disappeared, absorbed, unified, erased. But this one didn't, through geography, through luck, through stubborn resistance. It survived, not fully independent, not fully controlled, something in between. And maybe that's the real lesson here, because sometimes the places that don't follow the rules end up creating their own. The Isle of Man isn't powerful because it's big or rich or strategic. It's powerful because it never fully belonged to anyone. And in a world of strict borders and rigid systems, that might be the rarest position of all. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, check out the next video about the Falkland Islands, another place that technically exists, but doesn't quite fit anywhere.